the government.
You can see from the chart that it's spiking right now.
Well, we had a substantial increase in the deficit in connection with the pandemic.
I want to be as respectful as I can because I totally disagree with what you all are doing, implementing the EV credits. This is how we wrote the bill. It's in the bill, specific. First year, 2023, 40%. You all cut it in half to 20.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, this is here.
See that.
This is 40%.
What is 40? What is 40?
Let's get it up there closer. You can see how it does, okay? First year, second year, third year. You've cut everything in half. Everything in half.
I believe that the rules we wrote are in accord with what's in the statute.
And again, I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. They absolutely are not. And I'm encouraging every manufacturer to sue you.
Which is where the complications come
Complication
into
is this
play.
administration doesn't want anything that comes out of the ground. I'm fighting them tooth and nail.
About a $1.1 trillion deficit. Is that correct?
About 1.6, I believe.
1.6 trillion. I'm sorry. It's even worse than I thought.
The less, the better.
Okay. Then why aren't you doing that with federal borrowing?
Well,
the reason you're doing this is to try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Now, you know that, and I know that.
And that begs the question. As I see it, there are only 3 reasons why the Treasury could be issuing so much on the short end of the curve. 1, it could be that you're concerned about inadequate demand for longer-term Treasuries. I hope that's not the case. Second, it could be that you're waiting to lock in longer-term issuances until the Fed has cut rates. If that's the case, I'd like to know what informational basis you might be using to time the market in this manner. But the most dangerous could be that you're suppressing rates in order to ease financial conditions for President Biden in an election year leading up to November. And I think that creates an extreme concern. Which one of these 3 would it be, Secretary Yellen?
Well, first of all, let me say we never time the market. A tenet of Treasury debt management is that issuance should be regular and predictable, and that's appropriate over time.
And yet it's spiking.
The government.
You can see from the chart that it's spiking right now.
Well, we had a substantial increase in the deficit in connection with the pandemic.
This is very nice. Madam, I'm going to continue with the questioning now, if I may. You want to go ahead and restart? But anyway, good to have you. Thank you for your service. And first of all, I want to talk about the Bureau of Fiscal Service Management as far as the office in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Okay? The employees are not coming back to work. Now, I know that Senator Romney and I have introduced a piece of legislation that would say that at least 60% of the time they have to be in their office at work, okay? And I think that basically a relatively small increase above the 50% mark mandated by the Office of Management and Budget. OMB has said 50% of the time. I don't know if you know this or not, but that office in Parkersburg, West Virginia, people only have to be there 2 days of pay period. 2 days of pay period. What they end up doing, they come at the end of the first pay period, stay 2 days. The beginning of the second pay period, stay 2 days. There are 4 days out of a total of 2 pay period. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, and it's destroying the economy and the people that should be coming to work. They're living anywhere and they fly in. And this has got to stop. And you have to stop it, Madam Secretary, because it's not going to happen unless you clamp down tight. The rules say, OMB, at least 50%. We'll accept 50%. At least I get them there 10 days out of 20. Okay?
I appreciate the problem that this is causing, and I know that you've written a letter to Treasury about this.
We have specifics now we can help you all with. And now my next round is going to be, I want to be as respectful as I can because I totally disagree with what you all are doing, implementing the EV credits. The EV credits, electric vehicle credits. I know that because we wrote the bill. My committee wrote the bill completely.
I know.
And we wrote the intent of the bill. We have all the findings of what we did and how we did it. But let me just show this right here, Madam Secretary. The bill was very much written so that we would bring America back, bring manufacturing back to America, that we would not be relying on unreliable supply chains, especially the countries of 4 concerns, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And as we know, China has dominated the critical minerals industry. But here's what you all have done. Your permanent rules, these are your permanent rules, came from y'all. This is how we wrote the bill. It's in the bill, specific. First year, 2023, 40%. You all cut it in half to 20.
I'm sorry, I can't,
Okay, this is here.
See that.
This is 40%.
what is
Closer.
40,
Put
what
it
is
up.
40?
Let's get it up there
Holy-
closer. You can see how it does, okay? First year, second year, third year. You've cut everything in half. Everything in half. It makes no sense because you're going to get sued on all of this from people who have been damaged. The manufacturers that are investing money that thought that they would not be inundated with lower prices, unfair competition, especially from China, you've given them the ability to come after them now. Okay, you can see this all the way through.
So why do you think we've cut this in half? You're talking about the.
This is your rules.
The requirements.
The requirements of what should be from
Batteries, battery components.
processing,
And for
critical
minerals.
sourcing and processing. You've even tried to change the definition of processing to where some of the manufacturing can be done and considered in processing. You've done that. We have all of that. The only thing I'm trying to be very respectful. You are going to be sued, and we're going to do a writ of mandamus, amicus brief, to help the people that are suing, because this is how we wrote the bill. We wanted it to be America. We wanted it to be with free trade agreement countries. We wanted not to be reliant on China. This absolutely allows China in the market and staying in the market for the entire extent of the IRA.
I'm sorry, we put out the FIAC restrictions that pertain to China, and those restrictions mean that this year you can't have battery components that are made in China, and next year a vehicle.
Why did you cut it in half then? Why did you cut it in half?
Cut what?
You cut basically the requirement of how much had to come from where. This had to come from America free trade agreements. This can come from non-free, anywhere else in the world. This is what's happening. I can go into it in detail, but this is, I have been raising absolutely holy Cain from day one. Now, we wrote the IRA as a very balanced bill to have energy. As far as basically, if we're going to basically change our entire transportation mode, it's the first time in the history of the United States of America we cannot basically provide all the components for a transportation mode. We're willing to be reliant on, especially of China, which had a total lock on the EVs.
We share the objective that you have, which is to rid ourselves of dependence
Who
on
on your staff
China.
changed this in half,
And
I would say?
I'm not sure. I think we need to have a technical discussion
We've
of
been
this.
calling you about,
because
anybody here, any of you all work
because-
on this?
Because I believe that the rules we wrote are in accord with what's in the statute.
And again,
about what's required.
I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. They absolutely are not. And I am encouraging every manufacturer to sue you.
Well,
And I will do the amicus brief on behalf, and we'll show you exactly how we wrote the bill, the intent of the bill, and you'll lose every suit. I know that. So in order to avoid all of that, why can't we just basically implement the bill the way it was written? And I've said this, you all, and basically the administration, and these are people I've known forever, you're trying to implement a bill you never passed. This is not the BBB. This is the IRA.
Well, we shared the objective that
let's
you
go one
had in writing the bill.
I know.
And I believe we have implemented it in accordance
Let's go
with
one step
what's
further,
in
if
the
I may.
law.
Senator Coons, based on the hydrogen hub, okay? Now, let me explain. The hydrogen hub, we wrote that in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then we came back and funded it in the IRA. This is how we wrote. This is how we wrote the bill. This is how we wrote. We're happy to share all this with you. I think, hopefully, some of your staff knows this. Where did additionality come in? Where did time matching come in? Where did regionality come in? Who made that up?
Well,
We never had one iota of a word in that written. We wrote the bill.
But-
And then all of a sudden, these are the conditions to get the credits. Now, with that, where's the other? Let me show you this one. This is from the 7 hubs. Every one of the hubs have written to you all. Now, can you have the California hub and a West Virginia hub that agree? Something's wrong. We must be on the right track. But you all, every hub to agree said, it's no longer commercially viable if you do what you're doing, implementation of the hydrogen rules. This is what we're dealing with. It's killing us. We shouldn't be fighting within ourselves. Just write the rules the way the bill was intended to write. We wrote it.
Well, the hydrogen rule has to abide by the Clean Air Act definition of life cycle
Well,
emissions.
the whole thing is basically what...
And that means taking account of indirect emissions, which is where the complications come
complication
into
is this
play.
administration doesn't want anything that comes out of the ground. I'm fighting them tooth and nail. We're producing more energy than ever in the history of the United States of America. If it wasn't for that, your inflation would be sky high. The prices of gas would be at $5. And what we're doing, because we're using blue hydrogen, is where they're going nuts on. That's it. But you're going to have it in this mix, or we will not be energy independent.
We recognize that there's an issue with respect to the hydrogen hubs, and we've asked explicitly in the guidance we put out how people suggest addressing it. We're reviewing the comments.
I'm out of time, but I would love to sit down. We're trying to give you the benefit of the doubt in so many things, trying to work with you, but it just seems that's impossible because they're hell-bent on implementing things that were never intended in the bill and were not written in the IRA or any of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we're going to continue to fight to make sure that you confirm,
Well, I would like to have
we'd be happy to do that. ma'am.
understand why you think we've halved.
Well, we can definitely show you word by word. And I hope that whoever's in this audience with you right now, or whoever wrote some of these things, I would like to have them in the room too.
Yes, I agree.
All righty. I'm sorry.
Right now, in our current fiscal year, by our, I mean the federal government, we're running looks like about a $1.1 trillion deficit. Is that correct?
About 1.6, I believe.
1.6 trillion. I'm sorry. It's even worse than I thought. And that, of course, means that we're spending $1.6 trillion more than we're taking in revenues. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're filling the hole by borrowing money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, if you personally were borrowing money, would you rather pay 5.4% interest or 4.4% interest?
The less the better.
Ma'am?
The less the better.
Okay. Then why aren't you doing that with federal borrowing?
Well, in federal borrowing, our objective is to issue at least cost over time and not to try to time the market.
Yeah, but you are timing the market. You issued a press release back in November that you were going to try to time the market. I mean, right now, you can issue 3-month treasuries. These are yesterday's yields at roughly 5.4%.
Yes.
But you could issue a 10-year Treasury note for 4.4% and save. Let me just finish. And save the taxpayer a lot of money. And then last November, you issued a press release. You said we're going to start borrowing more short-term debt than we normally would. At the beginning of 2023, our short-term debt was about 15%. And last November, you said we're going to increase that.
To about.
And now it's about 22, 23%.
Correct.
You're costing the taxpayers billions. Why are you doing that?
So, Senator, you say it costs 5.4%. That's what it costs this year.
No, that's what it cost yesterday.
Yes, but when you issue 10-year bonds, you're locking in the 10-year rate over 10 years. And that 10-year rate, the reason that holders of 10-year Treasury bonds are willing to accept a 4.3, 4.4% yield is because when those same individuals could be investing at 5.4%.
Madam Secretary.
No, I'm sorry, I would like
But,
to.
Madam Secretary, that's just, no offense. That's double talk.
It
Here's
isn't double
my
talk because
maybe
it
it's
is
my fault.
expected that
Maybe it's my
interest-
fault.
No,
Today, you can borrow for 3 months at 5.4%, but instead you're choosing, strike that. Today, you can borrow for 10 years at 4.4%. Instead, you're choosing to borrow at 5.4%.
market participants believe that.
That makes no sense.
Market participants believe that short-term interest rates will come down, and they will come down to a level substantially
So you are
below
trying to time the market.
current 10-year rate.
You are trying to time the
And
market.
so, no, it isn't a question of timing the market. It's we issue across the curve in a regular and predictable way.
You don't.
And
You
the reason
announced
that
last
paying.
November, you announced last November, I can show you the press release, where you said that we have decided to start issuing an inordinately large amount of short-term debt, didn't you?
We did make an announcement
And
about.
because of the inverted yield curve, that means that you're going to pay more in interest on short-term debt than, say, 10-year debt.
Only for a short time.
Now, that's a fact, okay? You can go check the numbers of Treasuries yesterday. That is first, that costs taxpayers a lot more money in interest. And number two, you're working at cross purposes with the Federal Reserve, because what you're doing is stimulating the market. You're pumping money into the economy. And Jay Powell is over here beavering away trying to reduce inflation. And you're beavering away trying to increase it by
There's nothing
paying
that we're doing
an interest
that's-
rate that is 100 basis points higher than you would have to pay. And the only reason I can figure that y'all are doing that is to try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Why else would anybody want to borrow at 5% when you can borrow at 4%?
Well, there is a good reason that investors are willing to accept just over 4% on a 10-year Treasury bond when they can earn 5.4% on a one-year Treasury bill.
I'm not worried about the investor.
Well,
I'm
the
not worried
same-
about the investor.
it's
I'm
the
worried
same-
about the taxpayer.
It's the same logic.
And let me ask you again, because I'm going to run out of time. And look, you're smarter than me. I know that. But I can grasp this concept. You're borrowing at 5% when you could borrow at 4% to deficit spend.
If I borrow it,
And
if
it
I
makes absolutely no sense to me why you
I
would
am
do
sorry,
that,
if I borrow-
other
the
than
reason
to try
is-
to artificially stimulate the economy
If
and
I
help Joe
borrow
Biden
at
get
4%, if I borrow at 4.5%, I'm locking in that cost over 10 years.
but you just
If
said
I
you weren't
borrow
trying
at
to time the
5
market.
Well,
You are trying to time the market.
it isn't trying to time the market because this is something that is a regular part of our policy. When short-term rates are high, and long-term rates are lower, the reason for that is that market participants expect short rates to go down, and they expect them to decline over 10 years to substantially under 4.5%. So even if we pay more this year than it would cost to borrow at a 10-year rate of 4.5%, the expected cost over the 10-year life of that borrowing can be the same or less than it would be if we issued a 10-year note. Now, we're not trying to time the market. We have a policy that we want to hold the issuance of short-term bills in line with recommendations of the Treasury Borrowing Advisory Committee.
Can I say something now? Madam Secretary, I'm going to say it again. You're a lot smarter than me. But my mama didn't raise a fool. And if she did, it was one of my brothers. And what you're doing, you know it and I know it. And all those people sitting behind you know it. You're paying 5% to borrow money when you could pay 4% to borrow money. You announced you were going to do that back in November 2023. You're working cross purposes with Jay Powell, who's
We're
trying.
not working.
And the reason you're doing this, is try to give the economy a sugar high 5 months before an election. Now, you
Issue-
know that, and I know that.
There's nothing about issuing short-term
Senator.
debt that creates a sugar
I'm out of
high
time.
for the
My chairman
economy.
says I'm out of time.
How does the FY25 budget request build upon the success of IRA investments?
Well, direct file was made possible by resources in the Inflation Reduction Act. They enabled us to invest in the IRS and deliver world-class service and develop the direct file. And we intend to continue using those resources to support direct file. We've recently decided to make it permanent. We'll extend to all 50 states. Hopefully, they'll all want to partner with IRS. Those resources will be critical to covering the cost.
Does your budget request enable you to be able to expand it to all 50 states?
Yes, in the sense the request includes both an appropriation, annual appropriations, and also an increase in mandatory funding for the IRS. And that combination would enable us to do that.